answering the second part of your question, yes. Once those allocation percentages are applied to the combined catch limit and the allocation is determined for each sector, the commercial fishery management won't change because that system has been set up for a while, and as we saw, that fishery doesn't exceed its catch limits. But this new proposal for the bag limits and the potential size limits would be intended to keep charter harvest within that allocation.
Is there any thought given, or has there been any analysis done on the revenue generated per pound of fish caught or something along that line?
Yep, we're getting a lot of questions about that. The council and NOAA Fisheries are required to do economic analyses of every action that they undertake. However, we do acknowledge that the cost and revenue information for the charter fisheries and even for the commercial fisheries is fairly limited. Collecting it would be, we don't have authority to collect a lot of it, and so we rely a lot on surveys for particular areas, and they're not always comprehensive. And so the short answer is we used what we had or the council used what it had, and NOAA Fisheries will use the information that it has. And I actually brought this little cheat sheet that I just learned about the other day. NOAA Fisheries we have our sort of management group here in Juneau, but down in Seattle, there's the Alaska Fisheries Science Center, and that's the research arm of NOAA Fisheries. And there are a few research projects going on there to try and gather some more information. These research projects are focused on the charter aspect of the industry, and to try and develop some more annual cost and earnings information, just what are the different operation types, where do they fish, what types of services do they offer their clients, focusing on the charter businesses, and then also trying to get some information on the charter anglers that come here, the different types, whether you're on a cruise ship or you come to fish on a lodge, or you're an Alaska resident and you use a charter boat, to get your halibut. So there are some ongoing research projects, but we do. I do have to say that the economic data are fairly limited. We use the best we have, but it's fairly limited.
Yeah, I'm Jim Wilcox, speaking for the people that do their fishing in the grocery store. What's your, do you have a feel why the price of halibut has skyrocketed in the last year and a half?
Oh boy. Actually, Julie, if you could go to the graph, and this is just my conjecture, and again, the folks over here, you may have it with the commercial and charter. Economics would tell me there's a limited supply now from the commercial fishery, and I don't know. I'm sure it's much more complicated than that, and to be honest, I don't have a good feel for that, but I'm sure that has something to do with it.
Maybe one of the fishermen.
Well, having been invited, my name is Jeff Shelton. I am a longline fisherman as well as some other species. I think you're completely correct about the basis for the price increase. It's just a supply and demand kind of a function. The supply of halibut in Area 2C now is just about, taken from the longline fleet, is just about 20% of what it was 5 years ago. I suppose from the consumer's point of view, the good fortune is that the price hasn't actually quintupled during that time. But it's dangerously close. And another point, just while I have the floor, I think it's important to emphasize one of the points that I think you made very adequately, but I think it needs to be re-emphasized. There needs to be a great deal of care taken in distinguishing between sport and commercial on this issue. The sport fishery truly is the locals who go out and catch their own. There are no added limitations whatsoever to the ability of a local resident on his own fishing license to go out and catch absolutely as many halibut as he used to be able to, except that there are probably fewer around. There's a tendency, which is an incorrect one, to label the charter fishery as a sport fishery. You, I think, just before this topic came up, said it quite accurately. You're talking about two different business plans, two different businesses that are really very equally situated with respect to the resource. And so what we're talking about is not the access by the public to the fish. They get access to the public to the fish either through the store, where there's I've heard numbers which I have a little trouble verifying, but something in the order of 150 million halibut meals are served around the country coming out of the longline fishery, as opposed to the number, relatively smaller number of charter clients who go out and catch theirs. I suspect they don't want to sit down and calculate what the price per pound is for the fish that they get. The point being that this is a catch-sharing plan between two kinds of businesses. The irony in the whole situation is that in 2005, the council passed, as you correctly noted, a proposal that would simply combine within the individual quota system the two businesses and allow a completely free transfer back and forth, strictly driven by the market, between the two sectors who are out there harvesting halibut commercially. For reasons that I think to some of us are still unclear, the charter fleet bailed out and adamantly opposed that proposal, and then in the end succeeded in having it withdrawn, which I suspect simply put off the inevitable for a period of time. I think we'll get there, and this guided angular fish is the first step in getting there. But for those of us who are a bit inclined to letting the market drive the economics of the system, it's a bit disconcerting to be in a situation where one group of folk are coming trying to take more and get more gratis through regulation or through the political manipulation, and not allow the market to determine, just where are the economics of these two fisheries. Hopefully they'll ultimately get there, but that's not an unbiased perspective on this issue, but it's a perspective I think that's fairly broadly held.
Right, and I guess I would just add from my perspective, in adding on to what Mr. Shelton said, I think the council, for a couple of different reasons, they recognize the limited economic data we do have, and in making these allocation decisions is challenging. And quite frankly, if I was a council member, I wouldn't want this in front of me all the time. And so developing this market-based transfer mechanism is a rather elegant solution in many ways, and I think that's why the council recommended it as an important component of the catch sharing plan.
Other questions? One other.
Jeremy Woodrow at Sheetermeyer & Associates. We do consumer public relations for ASME. This is a great chart here because it shows that obviously in 2006 there was a lot of commercial fish being caught, and then it dropped out drastically. Now when I look at that, I'm wondering, have we lost that many fish out of the water? Or where are these fish going? I mean, obviously they weren't caught by sport, charter, and commercial fishermen, so where did that huge number go, and are these fish going to come back? Is NOAA doing studies of why these fish are disappearing? Or are we just going to see on the horizon that eventually this number is going to go down to a zero? What's going to happen for us, sport fishermen? Are there going to be no fish left? Because obviously the quota for charter is going to come to a zero when there's not enough fish to be caught out there.
Again, I think that's an excellent question, and unfortunately I'm not a fishery biologist, and so my interpretation of this drop-off, and again with limited knowledge, is based on IPHC stock assessments and modeling and those sorts of things. So again, the puzzle that I put up at the beginning, the IPHC is primarily responsible for stock assessments and research and those sorts of things for Pacific halibut. Right. And I'm probably not going to explain this adequately, but again, it's, and I think even IPHC scientists are not exactly sure what's happening. I don't think that the halibut have completely disappeared. They're just not growing to the size where we think it's okay to catch them. That, again, that exploitable biomass is the important word there. And again, I think also another factor in there, starting maybe around 2006, again, there were some modeling changes by the IPHC in its stock assessment and where the fish actually are, whether they're in discrete areas or whether they migrate a lot among the different areas. And I think that contributed to the decline in exploitable biomass, because when you have uncertainty like that, fishery managers get a little bit more conservative. So maybe Mr. Sheldon can help me with that.
If you don't mind adding a couple things. Halibut are a peculiar animal, and they're very, very cyclical on the one hand, but just the way their life cycle works, the biomass in the ocean tends to be driven by individual year classes where there's very good survival. So you have quite a period of the fishery that will be dominated by one year class that was huge. I think 1988 had a massive survival. And it drove the fishery all the way into the early 2000s. One of the early slides that you presented showed back into the very late 60s and early 70s, which if you notice, the total biomass back then was even lower than what we're seeing right now. So primarily what's going on is that there's been a series of poor survival years and this added phenomenon that the Halibut Commission doesn't understand fully, which is that the growth rate has slowed way down. Whether that's competition with other species, competition within year classes. There are a couple of year classes that appear to be very big, they just aren't growing very much. And that's a little tough to tell, but you know, it shouldn't be, there shouldn't be an immediate fear that the halibut are going extinct. This is just the way in which that species happens to fluctuate over time. And the fundamental element of this catch sharing plan is that the users of the resource ought to share the burden when it comes to making sure that the resource is conserved. And that's where the rub has come and why there's been so much controversy around getting any kind of a regulation on the charter fishery into place.
Well, thank you.